Welcome to another episode of Fight Night Daily Podcast. Myself and John Rawling. Well, John, we've just been at the weigh-in. What did you take from it? I mean, let's start with Liam Smith. He actually come in at 160 pounds. And Chris Eubank Jr, surprisingly to me anyway, coming at 159.5. The fight's made at 160. Well, I mean, did you take anything from that?
Not a lot, to be honest. I think we were wondering whether or not Eubank was going to be looking bad at the weight, because we'd heard he was a pound or two over, 5 pounds over on Wednesday, and he'd had to lose that to get down to 11 stone 6. But he seems to have taken it away okay, and on the scales, I thought he looked all right. I did think, arguably, of the two guys, I think maybe Eubank looked slightly the better.
Yeah, I agree with that actually. Like, you know, going back to the first fight back in January, I thought Eubank looked very drawn. He looked sort of dead at the weight, and I think that showed in his performance.
Well, he's had the nutritionist, hasn't he? So you would assume, having a nutritionist in his camp for the first time, that he's actually, you know, thought about it, and they've thought about it in a more scientific way.
I mean, why would he have brought that nutritionist in? Obviously, because of what happened in that fight. He recognised. Now, I spoke to him on Wednesday, and he said that he felt like his back was against the wall, and for the first time, he's felt the pressure. Hence why he's gone over to America, teamed up with Bomac, which we'll get into all that in a bit. But he said also, and that struck me, that one, he said about the nutritionist, he's actually started to listen to someone at a stage of his career he should have done maybe 5 years ago.
Well, there is a fairly coherent argument, isn't there? That if you look at his career, despite all the money that he's made, and you know, let's be honest about it, he's made a hell of a lot on the back of his surname and his dad's fame and reputation. But there is an argument, I think, that when you look at Eubank's career, that he's underachieved.
Yeah.
You know, I think that there's a danger he's going to, particularly if he loses tomorrow night. I think there's a danger that he's going to look at his career and think it's a case of what might have been rather than what really was.
Yeah, I mean, John, how does he turn it around tomorrow? Like, because the first fight was so conclusive in what, you know, in the way that it went, and the finish was obviously a spectacular finish as well. How does he reverse that loss? You know, what does he have to do? I mean, I know going over with Bomac, let's get into that. When he went over with Bomac, who's a great trainer, trains the likes of Terence Crawford, etc. I spoke to Bomac, and Bomac said, listen, we can't change anything right now. He's only been together 6 weeks. We can't change anything. All we got to do is strip it back to basics and make Chris switch on for 3 minutes of each round. Do you think it's possible he can turn it around? What do you think he's got to do?
I think it's a mindset as much as anything, isn't it? I think he has to have a real sense of self-belief. You know,
but he's got that though, isn't he?
Well, I don't know. Well, he did have. You know, he certainly thought he was going to win first time around. But I think the way he unravelled so spectacularly in that fourth round, you know, I mean, we're getting closer to it now, so I think I can probably say things without betraying confidences. I spoke to Liam's brother, Steve, and talking about that first fight, and I said, look, I don't mean this disrespectfully, but everybody knows that Liam's as hard as nails.
Yeah.
You know, if you talk about Liam Smith as a fighter, the biggest thing you'd say is that he is one tough guy. But he's never been a huge puncher. He's never been a big one-punch knockout guy. And yet Eubank made him look like Julian Jackson in there, didn't he?
Yeah, he did. I mean, the punch resistance was totally gone. Now, that can be down to a number of things. Obviously, him getting down to 157 or trying to get down to 157, but I think he hit 159 for the Conor Benn fight. You know, when a fighter strips himself down...
And he looked terrible, didn't he?
Yeah, he looked
terrible.
Trying to come back up again, sometimes that just takes all the resistance away, but... now he's had that more time, because he did look better on the scales, to be fair.
He did.
Do you think that he may have got some of that punch resistance back, or do you think it could be a case of father time? You know, because these are all the questions. I think this is what makes this fight so interesting still. You know, even though it was like a 4-round fight before, it makes it so interesting because you go, there's so many if, buts and maybes going into this.
He always traded on his athleticism, Chris.
Yeah.
And, you know, the one opponent that no athlete, and particularly no fighter, can beat is Anno Domini.
Yeah.
You know, you can't beat time, can you? And at 33, you can't expect him to be the athlete that he was when he was 25. And I think to actually think that you're going to improve punch resistance at that age is unrealistic. And it might just be, I mean, hey, I could be completely wrong, Spenny. You know how it is. That's why we love boxing, isn't it? It's full of shocks, but it just may be that what we were seeing in the first fight was a fighter who was coming towards the end of the road. The reactions had gone, the punch resistance had gone, and that he wasn't the man that he once was. And Liam, an altogether more one-dimensional fighter, if you like, very good fighter, but he's not the box of tricks that Eubank was and can be. But in forcing him to unravel in the way that he did, you wonder whether Chris, if not a shot fighter, is coming towards the end of the road.
Sure. I mean, listen, looking at them both on those scales, they both look fantastic on the scales. One thing I think we can guarantee, isn't it, that we are going to get a different fight from the first one. Whether it's the same result as the same winner, and that's what I believe it will be, but I truly believe it will be a different fight. I think it'll be a tougher fight, and I see at points I'm going towards Liam Smith. But looking at them both on the scales, Chris just does a great thing. He plays the psychological game where you start believing what he's saying. You know, he's great at drawing you in. He really is.
He's very articulate, isn't he?
He really is. And, just that whole rubbing his hands together at the, after weighing, is that because he thinks, because I know when you're struggling to make weight, when you get obviously, I think you're so happy because that's the biggest fight that you've ever made.
Phew.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank God for that.
But he just looks very happy, at peace with himself. Looks like he wants to right the wrongs of the last fight. But Smith, he was pumped still.
Yeah. And I'll tell you another thing which occurred to me, Spenny, watching that weigh-in and being around there. I mean, there must have been behind the great ranks of cameras taking pictures for various websites, various television channels, etc. There were a load of people in there, the public. They'd turned up in force. Yeah. There were hundreds there watching, and it has that real big fight feel about it. There's no titles at stake. There's nothing other than champions of two men. Who's going to be the better guy? That's what's at stake. Yeah. And it's captured the imagination of the public. It genuinely has that big fight feel, and I can't wait for Saturday night.
Sure, this is where I was going, because there was rumours circulating Chris was going to miss the weight because there wasn't a title on the line. And I'm thinking he's going to come in at 162, and that extra £2 for people that don't realise it, sort of
can be huge.
It's huge. Like, it's all water retention.
Well, you know all about that, don't you?
Absolutely. And like that extra £2 can make the difference between winning and losing. And I thought Chris might just bite the bullet, pay a massive fine, coming overweight. But I think actually him coming in at 159.5, I'm looking at it going, that's all part of his, because he's got a massive ego. I'm thinking,
just a bit.
Yeah, because he's got a massive ego. He's thinking, well, if I win this fight and I do turn it around, I don't want people to think that I've come in overweight and all that. So there has been mind games, psychological games, but they both made the weight. They both come in. Boy, I'm looking forward to that. And do you know what? There's one fight I want to mention just before we go.
Go on.
I mean, we've got a stacked undercard, an unbelievable undercard, but one that did stand out to me as well. Two guys that used to be sparring partners. Now one of them's on his way up. The other one's sort of been there and on his way down. And that's Fraser Clark versus Dave Allen. Now, heavyweight contest. Fraser's obviously the kid that's on the way up and he's the one that has been talked about. But spoke to Jamie Moore, and I think we spoke to him together, didn't we? And Jamie said, Spence,
and he's been looking after Dave.
Dave Allen. He said he's never been in shape before, ever. He just likes to have a fight. He turns up, and we know what he's like. He's a bit unpredictable, whatever. But he said, listen, people are writing him off, and I'll give him a real shot. Now, that sort of caught me in all, because Jamie's a great trainer. What was your thoughts on that?
Well, have you checked out the odds?
Yeah.
He's 10-1 on
That's
Fraser
what I'm
Clark,
saying.
and Jamie was saying that is crazy. That's insane,
Yeah.
And he gives Dave Allen a much better chance than that. And I think the most important thing from Fraser's perspective and our perspective as commentators and I suppose spectators as well is that at last Fraser's going to be hopefully in a proper fight and we see what he's made of.
Absolutely. Listen, I mean, look, it's a stacked card as well. Make sure you guys tune in to talkSPORT 2 from 7 p.m. and then we switch over to talkSPORT at 9 p.m. You catch all the action there live. John, before we go, can you give us a final prediction? Who do you think, after seeing them both on the scales, who do you think is going to win?
I think it's an old boxing truism that we've seen the fight. I think it was so conclusive first time around. I think that to pick Eubank to win this one would be something from the heart
Yeah.
rather from the head.
Sure.
And I think the logic and everything that you've seen points to victory for Liam Smith, and I wouldn't be surprised if he stops him again.
Sure. Well, I'm going to my co-commentator, and I think that as well. Mr. John Rawling, I think, has hit that right. I'm going Liam Smith on points. A tougher fight. But anyway, that's it for this week's ep of Fight Night Daily Podcast.
We know what you mean. We know what you mean.
Do you know what? I had a little blank then. Anyway, Fight Night Daily Podcast. But catch us tomorrow night for the post-fight Fight Night Daily Podcast, and we'll give you, some more juicy action.